Good day, everyone, and welcome to Cricket South Africa's Level 3 umpiring course. Today is lecture number 3, brought to you by Western Province Cricket Umpires Association. My name is Tom Mokorosi, and as usual, my co-presenter for this evening is Abdullah Steenkamp. The format of today's lecture is as follows. I will start taking you through all the content that is specific to the Cricket South Africa Level 3 exam. I will kick off with Laws 2 and Laws 11, and then Abdullah will take over and will take us through Laws 12 and Laws 14. And please be mindful that there are a lot of calculations in Cricket South Africa's Level 3 exam. We have not faced such calculations before in level 1 nor level 2. So we need to be very attentive in terms of not just knowing our laws, but also the calculations that are part of an umpire's duties to carry out in certain matches. On display is the meeting protocols for this and every other lecture. You will notice that your microphones and your cameras are actually active today. Please make sure that you do not switch them on until we get to our question and answer session at the end of the lecture. While we present, you are welcome to type questions into the chat box, and at the end of the presentation, we will go through all of those questions, and then we will also take any questions live in the meeting with virtual hands raised. Lecture number 6, which will be our final lecture. There we will be going through the logistics of the exam, as well as a click-by-click demonstration of the online exam. So don't worry if you're still not au fait with the online exam workings. We will get to those in our final lecture, lecture number 6. So let's get on to the content for today's lecture, starting with Law 2, the umpires. And we're only going to look at a certain subsection of law number 2, which is the position of umpires. Law tells us that the umpire shall stand where he or she can best see any act upon which his or her decision may be required. Strangely enough, the law doesn't specify that a bowler's end umpire needs to stand directly behind middle stump, but it is common practice to line yourself up with your partner helping you before a match, and that way you'll make sure that you are directly behind middle stump so you can judge leg before wicket decisions accurately. A lot of people often ask me, how far back from the bowler's end stumps should an umpire stand? It's different for everyone. Some stand 1 meter behind the stump, some stand 2 meters behind the stump, some stand 3 meters behind the stump, some stand up to 5 meters behind the stumps. You just need to be where you are most comfortable, and you need to be in a position where you don't move your head when you are judging the back foot landing, the front foot landing, and then switching your eyes to find the ball out of the bowler's hand towards the striker. So we do share some tips in terms of our practical training, where exactly to stand, and you can find some of those in our YouTube videos. There's a playlist called Practical Umpiring Videos. If you go to those, you will find where an umpire should stand, how far back from the stumps at the bowler's end a umpire should stand. And we'll teach you about setup as well as switching up and switching down. But that's not to do with the level 3 course. What we need to know for the level 3 course is that the bowler's end umpire shall stand in a position so as not to interfere with either the bowler's run-up or the striker's view. The striker's end umpire might need to stand on the offside instead of the onside of the pitch. And yes, law allows for him or her to move accordingly. But you, as a striker's end umpire, if you're moving from the leg side to the offside, from square leg to point, you need to inform 3 people: the captain of the fielding side, the striker, and the umpire who's at the bowler's end. Now, let's look at a video of an incident that happened many years ago in a Caribbean Premier League game where Tino Best was the bowler, and he decided, for a little bit of variation, he would bowl from very far behind the popping crease. So you can see in the screenshot on the right of the screen, there is Tino Best in his bowling action already, and he's probably a good 6 meters behind the popping crease, and he's also a meter behind the bowler's end umpire. So, is this allowed? What would you, as the bowler's end umpire, signal, if anything? Let's watch the video, and I will talk you through it afterwards.
He has bowled that from so far behind the umpire. That is the furthest I've ever seen a delivery served up from.
Okay, so the question is, and I'll play it again without any volume as I talk through it. Can umpire Gregory Braithwaite be certain that Tino Best is inside the return crease in terms of the back foot landing to be able to judge a no ball? No, he can't. Can Gregory Braithwaite determine with certainty that the ball was bowled legally in terms of the straightness of the arm? No, he cannot, because he did not see the ball being released by Tino Best. So, what is the umpiring procedure to take in this particular incident if it happens to you on field? So, firstly, we need to call and signal dead ball. Why do we call and signal dead ball? Because we are not sure of the validity of the delivery. We cannot call and signal no ball because we don't know, we didn't see the back foot landing outside or on the return crease. And we didn't see that the bowler bowled with a bent arm of 15 degrees or more. So this decision was taken by the umpires who were involved in a World Cup soon after this incident happened. They came together and they decided this is how they were going to handle a delivery being bowled from behind the bowler's end umpire. So the ball needs to be re-bowled after calling and signaling dead ball. You can discuss with the bowler if they would like you to stand a little bit further back, but within reason. You don't want to be so far back that you cannot hear the nicks that are at the striker's end. Obviously, you also don't want to be so far forward, like I said, that you have to move your head up and down to see the back foot landing, see the front foot landing, and then watch the ball towards the striker. So work with the bowler, yes, but tell them that you cannot bowl from behind me. I will call and signal dead ball every time. And if you continue to bowl from behind me, then we will have to consider it as time wasting, because the ball does not count as a legal delivery in the over and needs to be rebowled. So we would implement time wasting procedures against the fielding side if that was a continued practice. So that is the process to assume when you have a bowler bowling from behind the bowler's end umpire. Okay, that is all we are dealing with in terms of law 2 for this course. We are now moving on to law 11, which is the intervals. And this is going to be the first law that introduces calculations into our syllabus for this course. So firstly, what are the intervals that are recognized by the laws of cricket? First one is the period between the close of play on one day and the start of play the next day. That is considered an interval. So the time between stumps at day one and the call of play on the morning of day two is an interval. Interval between innings, we all know about. That is when one side has finished batting and the next team needs to come into bat. Intervals for meals and intervals for drinks. Then any other agreed interval will also be classified as a scheduled interval. What are the duration of these intervals? According to law, an interval for lunch or tea shall be of the agreed duration, taken from the time or the call of time before the interval until the call of play on resumption after the interval. So let's give examples to illustrate what the law is teaching us here. In a test match in South Africa, lunch is scheduled to be from 1200 hours until 2040. The sixth legal delivery in the over is bowled at exactly 1200 hours, and the bowler's end umpire calls over, time, and lunch. The first ball after lunch needs to be bowled exactly 40 minutes later, which will be 12:40. So that is a simple example of a lunch interval in a test match. Law simply says the interval shall be of the duration agreed. And in test match cricket, the ICC World Test Championship playing conditions stipulate that the lunch break will be 40 minutes. What's the duration of an interval between innings? Law tells us that it shall be 10 minutes commencing from the close of an innings until the call of play for the start of the next innings. Simple example, Team A gets dismissed at 11:10. Team B's innings will start 10 minutes later with the first ball of the innings to be bowled at 11:20. This is not always that straightforward, because you will know from level 2 that up to 7 minutes of rolling is allowed between two innings. So if the team that is going to bat next requests a heavy roller before their innings, then that heavy roller, if it's going to roll for 7 minutes, needs to be brought onto the field of play. Then 7 minutes of rolling needs to take place, and that heavy roller needs to be taken off the field of play, all within 10 minutes. So what we as umpires do, when the 9th wicket falls of the previous innings, then we will ask the fielding captain, when this innings ends, what roller do you want, if any, and for how long do you want rolling? So that as soon as that 10th wicket falls and the innings is complete, then we have already got the message through to the ground staff which roller will be used and how long they will be rolling for. That always helps to try and ensure that the change of innings interval is exactly 10 minutes. Now, if an innings ends when 10 minutes or less remains before the time agreed for close of play on any day, there shall be no further play on that day, and there shall be no change made to the time for the start of play on the following day. Here's an example to illustrate this point. Our test match in South Africa starts at 10 a.m. and is scheduled to close at 1700 hours. And for the purposes of this course, we are going to forget about the playing condition in test match cricket of an extra 30 minutes to get the overs in for the day. So law doesn't speak about extra 30 minutes to get the overs in. So our scheduled close of 1700 will remain 1700. This example says side A gets dismissed at 1650. What happens next? Does side B come into bat on that same day? No. It will be the end of the day's play at 1650 because it is 10 minutes or less to the close of play. No change shall be made to the time for the start of play on the following day. So if an innings ends at 1650, 51, 52, 53, all the way up until 1700, if the scheduled close of play is 1700 hours, then we will not have any further play on that day. Now, what if a captain declares an innings closed during an interruption or a scheduled interval of more than 10 minutes? Law tells us that provided that at least 10 minutes remains of the interruption or the interval, no adjustment shall be made to the time for resumption of play because the 10-minute interval between innings is completely included in the interruption or the interval. If less than 10 minutes remains of the interruption or interval when the captain declares the innings closed, then the next innings shall commence 10 minutes after the declaration or forfeiture is made. Here's an example to illustrate this point. Our lunch is scheduled from 12 until 12:40. Final ball is bowled at exactly 12:02, and the bowler's umpire calls overtime and lunch. So in this circumstance, what time is our lunchtime going to be? Yes, 40 minutes. It will never change. It will be 12:02 until 12:42. Team A at lunch is on 426 for 5. At 12:20, the captain of Team A informs the umpires that he or she is declaring. Okay, so we are still in our lunch break. We've only had 18 minutes of the lunch break. There's still 22 minutes left of this particular lunch break when the captain of Team A declares his or her innings closed. What do we do as umpires when a captain declares their innings closed? We go to the captain of the opposing side to inform him or her that the opposing captain has just declared. So they need to get ready to bat when play resumes. And of course, we ask them what roller they want and if they do want a roller, how long should we roll for? So now our change of innings is incorporated into the lunch break because it runs from 12:20 until 12:30. Remember, our lunch break is supposed to end at 12:42. That is why the change of innings will be incorporated into the lunch break. And we will not have to deduct any overs from the full day's play. First ball after lunch will still be bowled at 12:42, now with side B batting. If at any time during the match, either playing time is lost through adverse conditions of ground, weather, or light, or in exceptional circumstances, or the players have occasion to leave the field other than at a scheduled interval, the time of the lunch interval or the tea interval may be changed if the two umpires and both captains agree to a change of the lunch or the tea interval. Okay, so if there's agreement, then we can change it. If there is not agreement, there are still some times when the law tells us that we will change it, and we will see what those scenarios are. So when can we change the agreed time for the lunch interval? If an innings ends when 10 minutes or less remains before the scheduled lunch break, the interval shall be taken immediately. It shall be of the agreed duration and shall be considered to include the 10-minute interval between innings. Here's an example to illustrate that point one. Lunch is scheduled from 12 to 12:40. Team A is dismissed at 11:52. What happens next? Law tells us that because the innings ended 10 minutes or less before lunch, there does not need to be an agreement between captains and umpires. The interval shall be taken immediately. So it will remain its agreed duration of 40 minutes, meaning which we will now take lunch immediately at 11:52 until 40 minutes later, 12:32. And the change of innings is included in that lunch break. We won't lose any overs. First ball after lunch to be bowled at 12:32. Pretty straightforward. We are still looking at when we can change the agreed time for lunch. If because of adverse conditions of ground, weather, or light, or in exceptional circumstances, a stoppage occurs when 10 minutes or less remains before the agreed time for lunch, then whether or not an agreement is reached, the interval shall be taken immediately. It shall be of the agreed duration, and play shall resume at the end of this interval or as soon as conditions allow. Let's look at another example to illustrate this point. Lunch is still scheduled from 12 to 12:40, but at 11:54 it starts to rain. What do we do now? Law tells us that since it is a stoppage that has occurred 10 minutes or less before the scheduled lunch break, no agreement needs to be had. The interval shall be taken immediately. It shall be of the agreed 40-minute duration. Therefore, it will run from 11:54 until 12:34. Okay. No overs will be lost. Of course, that is if there is no rain after the lunch break. First ball after lunch to be bowled at 12:34 if conditions permit. We have another instant where the agreed time for lunch can be changed. If the players have occasion to leave the field for any reason when more than 10 minutes remain before the agreed time for lunch, then unless the umpires and both captains together agreed to alter it, lunch shall be taken at the agreed time. So if there's no agreement and the interruption or the reason to leave the field is more than 10 minutes before the agreed lunchtime, then the lunchtime remains at 12. Let's have an example to illustrate this point. Lunch is scheduled from 12 to 12:40. At 11:46, it starts to rain. How many minutes before 12 is that? That is 14 minutes before 12 o'clock. What happens next? Since the stoppage occurs with more than 10 minutes to lunch, then unless the umpires and both captains agree to alter the lunch time, lunch shall be taken at the agreed time of 12. So lunch doesn't have more flexibility than 10 minutes, except if there's an agreement between both the captains and the umpires to move it more than the 10 minutes allowed without an agreement. So we've had a look at lunch. Now let's have a look at the tea interval. When can we move the tea interval? Can we move the tea interval? Let's see what the law says. Yes, we can. The first example of how and when we can move the tea interval: if an innings ends when 30 minutes or less remains before the agreed time for tea, the interval shall be taken immediately. It shall be of the agreed duration and shall be considered to include the 10-minute interval between innings. So the agreed duration for tea in test match cricket around the world is 20 minutes. In South Africa, if we start, normally our tea break is scheduled from 1500 hours until 1520. Team A is dismissed at 14:38. What happens next? So how many minutes before 1500 is that? That is 22 minutes before 1500. Since the innings ended less than 30 minutes before the scheduled tea break, the tea interval shall be moved and taken immediately at 14:38. Tea will now be from 14:38 until 14:58 because it remains its agreed duration of 20 minutes. The change of innings will be incorporated into the tea interval. No overs will be lost in the day's play. First ball after tea to be bowled at 14:58. If when 30 minutes remains before the agreed time for tea, an interval between innings is already in progress, play shall resume at the end of the 10-minute interval if conditions permit. So we're not moving the tea interval here because the change of innings was more than 30 minutes before the scheduled tea time. Let's have a look at an example. Tea is scheduled from 3 until 3:20. Team A is dismissed at 14:22. That is 38 minutes before the scheduled tea break. What happens next? Because the innings ended with more than 30 minutes before the scheduled tea time, we cannot take an early tea. So we need to take our 10-minute change of innings. And as per the law, because this 10-minute change of innings is not incorporated into the tea break, nor is it incorporated into the lunch break, then we will deduct 3 overs from the number of overs remaining in the day's play. Why is it 3 overs? Abdullah will take us through Law 12, which tells us that the over rate that Law wants teams to bowl at is 20 overs per hour, which is 3 minutes per over. And in 10 minutes, you can fit 3 full overs, which are 3 minutes long. So that is why for the exam, when you are reducing the number of overs remaining in a day because of a 10-minute changeover that does not happen or is not included in a tea break or a lunch break, then we deduct 3 overs for the overs remaining in the day. Okay. So what happens at 14:32? First ball of Team B innings is bowled, and we play until 1500, and we take tea at 1500 until 1520, normal scheduled time. If because of adverse conditions of ground, weather or light, or in exceptional circumstances, a stoppage occurs when 30 minutes or less remains before the agreed time for tea, unless there is an agreement to change the time for tea, or the captains agree to forego the tea interval, the interval shall be taken immediately. It shall be of the agreed duration, and play shall resume at the end of the interval or as soon as conditions permit, whichever comes later. Let's go through an example to illustrate this point. So our tea break is scheduled from 3 to 3 p.m. At 14:46, it starts to rain. How many minutes before 3 p.m. is that? That is 14 minutes before 3. So it is within that 30-minute window period. So because the stoppage occurs with 30 minutes or less before tea, the interval shall be taken immediately. It shall be of the agreed duration of 20 minutes. So it will start at 14:46 when we go off for rain, and it will end at 15:06. First ball after tea, weather and light permitting, to be bowled at 15:06. Now, what if a stoppage is already in progress when 30 minutes remains before the agreed time for tea? Law tells us that we must bring tea forward by 30 minutes. The interval shall be of the agreed duration, and play shall resume at the end of the interval or as soon as conditions permit. Let's have a look at an example to illustrate this point. Tea is scheduled again from 3 until 15:20. At 14:20, it starts to rain. How many minutes before the scheduled tea break is that? That is 40 minutes before the scheduled tea break. So can we take tea immediately? No, we cannot. So what do we do? Law tells us that since the stoppage occurs more than 30 minutes to tea, we cannot take an early tea. However, when we get to 14:30, which is 30 minutes before the scheduled start of the tea break, then yes, we can bring the tea break forward by 30 minutes and start it at 14:30. It is now going to take place from 14:30 to 14:50, and the first ball after tea will be bowled at 15:50 14:50 if weather and light permit. Okay. So that's how we move tea. Law also provides lunch or tea being moved back. So we've seen incidents where lunch and tea is brought forward, brought earlier. Now we're going to look at what happens when 9 wickets are down at lunchtime or at tea time. We can actually postpone or move lunch or tea back by up to 30 minutes. Let's see how this law works. If 9 wickets are down when we reach the agreed time for lunch or for tea, then law tells us the interval will not be taken until 30 minutes later, until the end of the over that is in progress, 30 minutes after the originally agreed time for lunch or tea, unless the players have cause to leave the field or the innings is completed. Okay, so if there are 9 wickets down when lunchtime is supposed to happen at 12 or tea time is supposed to happen at 3 p.m., we do not take lunch at 12. We do not take tea at 3. We carry on playing for up to 30 minutes to give the bowling side an opportunity to take the final wicket to complete the innings. Historically, the last wicket does not last too long. That is why this law is in place, so that the team in the field can get the 10th wicket. If they cannot after the extra 30 minutes, then we will take that lunch or tea break. Let's have a look at an example to illustrate that point. Tea is still scheduled to be from 1500 hours until 1520. Team A is 212 for 9 when the final ball of the over is bowled at 3 p.m. Do we take tea? No. Law tells us that since Team A is 9 wickets down at tea time, we need to extend the session by a maximum of 30 minutes. If Team B gets the final wicket at 15:10, then we will take tea immediately from 15:10 to 15:30. But if Team B fails to take the final wicket by 15:30, then at this time we will take tea. And the tea break will be from 15:30 until 15:50. Note that your close of play will not extend by 30 minutes. Our close of play is still scheduled for 1700, and when we get to 1700, that will be the end of the day's play. So if you lengthen one session by 30 minutes, you need to reduce the following session by 30 minutes. Let's look at what law tells us about our interval for drinks. If on any day the captains agree that there shall be intervals for drinks, the option to take such drinks will be available to either side. Each interval shall be kept as short as possible and shall not exceed 5 minutes. The playing conditions for test match cricket around the world specify a drinks break of 4 minutes halfway through each session. Law allows a maximum time of 5 minutes for a drinks break in any format of the game. In T20 competitions, if and when they do have drinks, usually they are 2.5 minute drinks breaks. Unless the captains agree to forego the drinks break, a drinks interval shall be taken at the end of the over in progress when the agreed time is reached. If, however, a wicket falls or a batter retires within 5 minutes of the agreed drinks break, then drinks shall be taken immediately. Let's have a look at an example to illustrate this point. So our test match morning session is from 10 a.m. until midday at 12. So drinks is scheduled halfway through that session from 11 until 11:04. After 19.1 balls, a wicket falls at 10:56. What happens next? How many minutes before the scheduled drinks break is 10:56? That is 4 minutes before the scheduled drinks break. So, since the wicket fell within 5 minutes to drinks, we will take the drinks break immediately. And it shall be of the agreed duration of 4 minutes. So 10:56 until 1100 hours will be our tea break. Our drinks break. The over will be completed after the drinks interval.
Law 12 is one of those meaty calculation laws. So in Law 12, the two subsections that we're going to cover is the last hour, and what happens if it rains in the last hour? And then secondly, what happens if there is an innings change in the last hour? So let's first start with this concept of the last hour, what it is, and the number of overs that needs to be bowled in the last hour according to the laws of cricket. And again, for the purposes of this level 3 course, we're focusing on the laws of cricket and not playing conditions. There are playing conditions that do slightly differ to the laws, but for the purposes of this course and for the exam, and you need to answer in the exam according to the laws of cricket. So in more-day cricket, and test match is an example of more-day cricket. Test match spans over 5 days. Provincial cricket spans over 4 days in South Africa. But I'll use test match cricket as an example. So in more-day cricket, there is this concept of the last hour. And you'll only find the last hour on the last day of the match. So in a test match, the last day is day number 5, and that is where you'll find the last hour. So if close of play is 5 o'clock in our test match, last hour in our test match will be from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. If it's a 4-day provincial match like we play in South Africa, the last hour of the match you will find on day number 4. And let's say close of play is 5 o'clock as well. So last hour in this 4-day match will be from 1600 hours till 1700 hours. So now the lawmakers brought a change to this last hour of the match. What change did they bring in? Many years ago, the fielding side would used to play unfairly. So what they will do is, when we get to the last day of the match, let's use a test match as an example. We'll get to day number 5. You will, we know close of play is 5 o'clock. And let's say we get to about 4 o'clock and the batting side, let's say, needs 70 runs to win. So what the fielding side would do is they would deliberately slow play down. They would try to bowl as little overs in that last hour as to prevent the batting side facing as little overs and trying to prevent them from getting to the target score. So what the lawmakers then decide, we need to change this. But if we do bring in a change, we need to then be fair to both sides. So let's have a look at the change that the lawmakers brought into. So they brought in this concept of the last hour. So now, when we get to the last hour, like in our test match, on day number 5, close of play is 5 o'clock. When we get to 4 o'clock, so last hour in our test match will be from 4 o'clock up until 5 o'clock. So now what the law wants is, in this last hour from 4 to 5, the fielding side needs to bowl a minimum of 20 overs. Again, emphasis on minimum 20 overs. So this is the change that the lawmakers brought in. They brought in this where the fielding side needs to bowl a minimum of 20. So this is now fair to both sides. So yes, there's an hour left. We now want the fielding side to bowl 20 overs in that last hour. A minimum of 20. So what happens if we start our last hour at 4 o'clock, and we now know we need to bowl a minimum of 20 overs in the last hour? So what happens if we get to 5 o'clock and we've only bowled 15 overs? So what happens next? Play will continue because the law wants a minimum of 20 to be bowled. So the fielding side needs to continue bowling for a further 5 overs. Similarly, if the over rate is quick, spinners both sides, and last hour started at 1600 hours, and we get to 1650, and they've already bowled 20 overs, the fielding side. What happens now? A minimum of 20.
What happens now? A minimum of 20. What happens now?
I hear echo in the background. Can you please mute your microphones? Thank you so much. So in my background, can you please?
Sorry, Abdullah, I muted all, and so I muted you as well. You'll have to unmute yourself to carry on. Apologies for that.
Sorry, Tom. Thank you so much. Yeah, when you present, you're not able to see whether you're on mute or not. So thank you for alerting me that I'm on mute.
Sure, go on.
So just to recap this concept of the last hour. It's day number 5 in our test match. I'm just using test match as an example. So close of play is 5 o'clock. So when we get to 4 o'clock, our last hour will start. So from 4 till 5, that will be our last hour. The law wants a minimum of 20 overs to be bowled in that last hour. So just to show you in test match cricket, they want 90 overs to be bowled. So if let's say day 1 starts at 10 o'clock, ends at 5 o'clock. So our last hour we will find on day number 5. So when we get to 4 o'clock up till 5 o'clock, that is where we'll find our last hour on day number 5. And the law wants a minimum of 20 overs to be bowled in that last hour. Again, emphasis on minimum of 20. So what will practically happen? When we get to 4 o'clock, the bowler's in umpire will then indicate to the scorers, to the players, by pointing to a raised wrist with the other hand, and this now indicates that the last hour is now going to start. So now the fielding side needs to bowl a minimum of 20 overs in this last hour. So from 4 till 5 o'clock, the law wants 20 overs to be bowled. Scenario 1, let's say the over rate is low and the fielding side only bowled 16 overs when we get to 5 o'clock. Because the law wants a minimum of 20 to be bowled, play will continue. The fielding side needs to bowl a further 4 overs. The law wants 20 overs to be bowled. Yes, the over rate was slow, but doesn't matter. We will continue playing up until we've bowled that 20 overs. You sometimes can have the over rate being quick if 2 spinners bowls from both ends, and the fielding side can bowl 20 overs before the cut-off time of 5 o'clock. Let's say in scenario 2, 20 overs was bowled by 16:48. So now what happens? Now, because the cutoff time is 5 o'clock, we can never end earlier than our cutoff time. We need to now continue playing for a further 12 minutes up until 5 o'clock. Because a minimum of 20 overs to be bowled in the last hour. They can bowl more if they want. They can bowl 50 overs if they want. So now the first subsection that I'm going to cover with examples is what happens if after the last hour has started, there is now an interruption in play. An example of a typical interruption, most of the time you will have a rain interruption. Can be any interruption. The player leaves the field, can be for rain, can be for bad light. But most of the time it's rain, and I'll use rain in my examples later in the slide. So now the last hour has started, and let's say it now started to rain. So now we know 1600 hours, our last hour started. We know the law wants 20 overs to be bowled. But now what happens if it rains in that last hour? Do we lose overs? Don't we lose overs? Let's see what the law tells us. So the law tells us is, yes, we're going to lose overs. So how are we going to calculate how do we lose overs? There are two steps. The first step is from the moment the interruption started, from the moment the players left the field, you need to write down that time. And then you need to write down the time that umpires decide that play will resume after the rain interruption. So now the time between that you left the field and when you're going to restart after the interruption, at that time you need to calculate. Let's look at an example. So our last hour started at 4 o'clock, and we know a minimum of 20 needs to be bowled. So at 6 minutes past 4, after the fielding side has bowled 2 overs, it starts to rain and players leave the field. It's a quick interruption. Umpires then decides that play can restart at 16:25. So point 1, there are 2 steps when to calculate how many overs you're going to need to reduce the 20 by. Your first step is you need to calculate how much time did you lose due to the rain interruption. That time calculation is made from when the time that the players left the field up until the time that the umpires decided that play can resume. So in my example, time lost due to rain was from 16:06 and play will restart at 16:05. So the difference is 19 minutes. So that's your first step. Calculate how many minutes we lost due to our rain. And then the second step that we need to do is 1 over to be deducted for every completed 3 minutes of time lost. 1 over for every completed 3 minutes of time lost. I'll use the same example. So in our previous slide, we calculated that we lost 19 minutes. So now to calculate how many overs we lost, I take my 19 and divide it by 3 into it. Then I get 6.33. But the law tells us 1 over to be deducted for every completed 3 minutes of time lost. So that means we will ignore the fraction. Another way of putting it, we will round down. So ignore the fractions because we're only looking at completed overs. So the completed overs is 6. So we lost 6 overs in total. And Tom mentioned earlier this 3 minutes. How did the lawmakers get to this 3 minutes? We saw that in the last hour, in that last 60 minutes, that the law wants 20 overs to be bowled in that 60 minutes. So if you take your 20 overs, If you take your 60 minutes and you divide 20 overs into it, the answer is then 3, and that's how they get this 1 over to be deducted for every completed 3 minutes of time lost. That's how they got to the 3 minutes. They took the 60 minutes in your last hour. We know we need to bowl 20 overs, so 60 divided by 20 is 3 minutes per over. So to come back to our example, and just to recap, as soon as there is an interruption in the last hour, this is now after the last hour has started, we need to lose overs. We need to deduct overs from the original 20 that we start with. How do we deduct overs? 2 steps. First step is, in this example, we need to calculate from the moment we left the field up until play is going to restart. So 16:25 and 16:06, this is 19 minutes. Then we take our 19 minutes and we divide it by 3. We only take the completed overs, so that's why we will ignore the fraction. So we lost 6 overs in total. So play will restart at 16:25. Captains will come to you and ask, Umpire, how many overs left in the last hour? So the amount of overs left in the last hour is, we started with 20. We at 4 o'clock when the last hour started, it was 20 overs. Then we lost 6 overs due to rain, which we just calculated. Then we also need to deduct the overs that was bowled. So in my question, if I can go back to it, you'll see in my question, yes, the last hour started at 4 o'clock, and at 16:06 it started to rain after 2 overs was bowled. So that's how I got this 2 overs. So the formula is overs at the start of the last hour, which was 20, less my overs that I lost due to rain, which is 6 overs in this example, less the 2 overs that was bowled. And when play restarts at 16:25, we will tell the both captains that there is a minimum of 12 overs left in the last hour. So 2 steps if it rains in the last hour to calculate how many overs left. Calculate the minutes lost due to the rain, divide that minutes by 6, and subtract from the overs at the start of the last hour, less the overs that we lost, less the overs that bowled. And we get our minimum number of overs in the last hour. Those are the 2 steps that we follow if it rains in the last hour. You often find instances where it rains more than once in the last hour. So our last hour starts. So now we play, let's say, for 10 minutes. Now it rains for let's say 15 minutes. Then we go off. We come back on. We play for another, let's say, 5 minutes. Now it rains again. We go back off. We rain for another, let's say, 6 minutes. We come back on, and let's say it rains for 4 or 5 minutes, 4 or 5 times in the last hour. So now there are like 4 interruptions in the last hour. So how do we deal with it? The law guides us, and the law tells us, please never ever add all those interruptions together. You need to do them separately. Your first interruption, once you leave the field, calculate how many minutes you lost, convert it to overs. That's your first interruption. Calculate how many overs left. Now you start playing. Now it rains again. You go off again. Now this is your second interruption. Now you're going to do a new calculation based on your second interruption. Similarly, your third and your fourth. Don't add it together. Do your interruptions separately. I do have an example where there are 2 interruptions in the last hour. And let's see how we need to handle them. So last hour starts at 4 o'clock. And we know we need to bowl a minimum of 20 overs. So at 16:09, after 2 overs were bowled, it starts to rain. Play then restarts at 16:20. Then play restarts at 16:20. It then starts raining again at 16:29 after further 3 overs was bowled. Play then resumes again at 16:43. How many overs left in the last hour? So you can see there are 2 interruptions here. Don't do them together. Don't add the overs and the times together. Do them separately. First focus on your first interruption. Then calculate how many overs left. Then after calculating how many overs left after your first interruption, now you look at your second interruption and then calculate how many overs left. So let's tackle our example. We start with our first interruption. So last hour started at 4 o'clock. At 16:09, after 2 overs, it started to rain and play can resume at 16:20. So what I do is just to help me keep track of where I am. I'm a visual being. I like writing things down. I like seeing things in front of me. Yes, you can do this in your head. If you practically, if you are at the field, I've seen many umpires do it in their head, but I prefer writing them down. And also for the exam, you need to write them down. You need to show all your calculations. You need to show the evaluator how you calculated your answer. These calculations questions are 4, 5 marks, 6, 7 marks. You cannot just be giving or write down the answer. Even if the answer is correct, yes, you'll get 1 point if there is a correct answer. But it's usually 5, 6 marks. To get 5, 6 marks, you need to show all your calculations in the exam. You need to show your evaluator how you derived or how you calculated your answer. So I write down my first interruption. It just helps me just keep track where I am, which interruption I am. So first interruption. First thing I need to do is calculate how much time did we lose due to rain. So we came off at 16:09 and play was going to restart at 16:20. So that's 11 minutes. That's the first step. And then the second step is we need to convert this 11 minutes to overs. And all you do is you divide 3 into 11. The answer is 3.66, but we only take completed overs. We'll ignore the fraction. So we lost 3 overs. Next, you need to calculate how many overs left. So the formula is, and the formula will always stay the same. Overs at the start of the last hour, which is 20. Over lost due to rain, which was 3. And then less the overs bowled. Because we started at 1600, it started to rain at 16:09. The fielding side bowled 2 overs in that 9 minutes. So we need to take overs bowled into account as well. So 20 minus 3 minus 2, 15 overs minimum left in the last hour. So before we take the field at 16:20, when play will restart, we will tell both captains, there are a minimum of 15 overs left when play restarts at 16:20. So this is now our first interruption. So now let's go to our second interruption. So second interruption tells us that, yes, we restart at 16:20. And then we play for a further 9 minutes and bowl 3 overs when it starts raining again at 16:29. And umpires decide that play can resume at 16:43. Now they ask you how many overs left in the last hour. So now we've calculated after our first interruption how many overs left. We started at 20, lost 3 due to rain, less 2 that was bowled. So we had 15 minimum left. So now our second interruption. So now now the first thing is again 2 steps. From the time we left the field when it started to rain, which was 16:29, up until play will restart at 16:43. And this equates to 14 minutes. That's the first step. Second step is convert that 14 minutes into overs lost. You divided 3 into it, you get 4.66. And this equates to 4 overs. You'll ignore the fraction. But now we in our second interruption. Very important that you need to take note. When we do our calculation for overs left, we in our second interruption now. We cannot now start with 20 overs, which was at the start of our last hour. We now need to start with the overs that was left after our first interruption, which is 15, 1-5. We cannot start with 20 at our second interruption. We need to start with 15. And then we deduct 4 overs that we lost due to rain. And then we need to deduct overs that was bowled, which was 3. And then 15 minus 4 minus 3 gives you 8 overs minimum. So before we take the field at 16:43, we will inform both captains. Captains, we have 8 overs left minimum to complete in the last hour. We've now covered the first subsection and the last hour. What happens if it rains in the last hour? I'm just using rain as an example. It can be any interruption. It can be bad light, it can be lightning, whatever the case may be. But rain is most of the time you leave the field due to rain. Second subsection that we're covering, and again this is after the last hour has started. So our last hour started in our test match. Day 5 started at 4 o'clock. And we know it will end at 5 o'clock. So now, after the last hour has started, there is now a team gets dismissed and there is now a change of innings. Now, captains comes to you and say, umpires, there's now a change of innings. How many overs now left in the last hour? We get guided by the law, and the law tells us we need to do the following. After the last hour has started, if there is an innings change, we need to do 2 calculations. After doing calculation 1, you'll write down the answer. You'll do calculation 2, you'll write down the answer. And then, after calculating both, after you get both your answers, you need to compare the 2 answers, and the greater of the 2 answers, that will be your minimum number of overs to be bowled in the last hour. Bear with me. I'm going through the theory. I do have example that will show you exactly how to apply the theory. But for now, once the last hour has started, and there's now an interval between innings, a side was now dismissed after the last hour has started. So captains would want to know, umpire, how many overs left? The law tells us 2 calculations needs to be made. You'll do calculation 1 and you'll get an answer. You need to do a second calculation and you'll then get an answer. You then need to compare these 2 answers, answer of calculation 1 and compare to calculation 2. The greater of the 2 answers, that will be your minimum number of overs to be bowled in the last hour. So that's the theory. So remember I said there are 2 calculations that needs to be made. The first calculation is a calculation based on overs remaining. There are 3 steps in this calc. First step is, at the conclusion of the innings, calculate the number of overs that remain to be bowled in the last hour. You need to write it down. That's the first step. Second step is, if your answer in bullet point 1 is not a whole number, round up to the next whole number. And the last step, deduct 3 overs for the change of innings interval. These are the 3 steps that you need to do in your first calculation. Bear with me. We're going through the theory. I do have an example, and you will see how we practically apply this the theory. So just bear with me. I'm just taking you through the theory first. Just to recap where we are. If there is an innings change in the last hour, we need to do 2 calculations. We then need to compare the answers of the 2 calculations and take the greater of the 2. So the first calculation that we need to do is, there are 3 steps in that calculation, and this calculation is called a calculation based on overs remaining. So the first step is, as soon as the innings ended of the side was dismissed in the last hour, as soon as the innings ended, you need to calculate how many overs remaining in the last hour to the ball. Then, if your answer in bullet point 1 is not a whole number, you then round up to the next whole number. And then the last step, deduct 3 overs for the change of innings interval. That's the theory when we do your first calculation. Then the second calculation, and this is called a calc based on time remaining. Also 3 steps to follow here. The first step is, when the innings ended, please calculate the time that remains until the close of play. Second step, take your answer in bullet point 1 and subtract 10 minutes from it for the change of innings interval. And then last step is, take your answer in bullet point 2 and divide 3 into it. So a calculation to be made made 1 over for every completed 3 minutes of time remaining. And if there is a fraction left, you'll add another over. Again, bear with me. We're going to see how we practically apply this now. Okay, so let's do an example and see how we practically apply the law. Our last hour starts at 4 o'clock. At 16:19, after 5.2 overs, Team A gets dismissed. There will now be a 10-minute change of innings. Captains now ask you, umpire, how many overs left in the last hour? So now, firstly, and again, you need to show all your calcs. You need to show how you got to your answer. Also, there are marks in, you need to write down how the law works. You don't need to quote the law verbatim. All the evaluator wants to see is, does the candidate know how the law works? So, first in my answer, I tell the evaluator how the law works. There was an innings change in the last hour, so now we need to do 2 calculations. And the greater of the 2 calculations, or the greater of the 2 answers, that will be your minimum number of overs left in the last hour. You can just summarize it. You don't need to quote the law verbatim. So there's already a mark for you. So we know we need to do 2 calcs. So there's a calc based on overs remaining. 3 steps in this calc. When the innings ended, calculate how many overs remaining to the ball. If your answer in bullet point 1 is not a whole number, round up to the next whole number. Then subtract 3 overs for the change of innings interval. So that's the theory. Let's apply the theory to our example. So our calculation based on overs remaining. At last hour is from 4 till 5, and we know we need to bowl 20 overs. So when did the innings end? We need to calculate the amount of overs remaining to the ball. So when the side was dismissed, it was after 5.2 overs was bowled. So if we started with 20 overs at the start of the last hour, the fielding side has now bowled 5.2. We're now left with 14.4 overs. You need to calculate this to the ball. No rounding up, no rounding down. The law, if I can go to the theory, if you look at bullet point 1, they tell you at the conclusion of the innings, calculate the number of overs that remain in the last hour to the ball. So I've done it. I've took my 20, I subtracted 5.2, and I'm left with 14.4. So now I've done bullet point 1, to the ball. Bullet point 2 tells me, if my answer in bullet point 1 was not a whole number, I need to round up to the next whole number. So 14.4 is not a whole number. So what is the next whole number? If I round up, 15. 15 is the next whole number. Then my last step is deduct 3 overs for the change of innings. 15 minus 3, and my answer is 12 overs minimum left in the last hour. So now I've derived my answer for my time-based, for my overs-based calculation. So I've now done my first calc, and the answer is 12. So this is my first calc. Now I need to do my second calc. And my second calculation is a calc based on time remaining. Also 3 steps. Let's quickly go through the theory, and then we're going to apply it to our example. First bullet point is, when the innings ended, please calculate exactly to the minute how much time left in the last hour. Then take your answer in bullet point 1 and deduct 10 minutes from it. Then take your answer in bullet point 2 and divide it by 3. If you do have a fraction left, add another over. Okay, that's the theory. Let's apply it to our example. The first point is, when the innings ended, see how much time left in the last hour. So we know our last hour was 1600 till 1600 hours till 17. So the time remaining, the innings ended at 1619. So from 1619 up until the end of the last hour, I need to calculate that minutes. So if the innings ended at 1619 until 5 o'clock, that is 41 minutes. So I've now done my first bullet point. My second bullet point is, I take this 41 minutes and I now need to subtract 10 minutes for the innings change. And now I get 31 minutes left. So now I've done my second bullet point. So now I need to do my third bullet point. And there I need to take my 31, which is my answer in my second bullet point. I then divide 3 into it. I then get 10.33. So now what the law tells us is, if you do have a fraction, you need to add another over. So yes, I take 10. I do have a fraction, so I'll add another over. So my answer here is 10 plus 1 is 11 overs. So my answer for my time-based calc is 11 overs. So now I do have an answer for my overs-based calc, which was 12, and I have an overs for my time-based calc, which is 11. So now I need to use the greater of the two, and obviously 12 is the greater of the two. So I will tell the captains that there are a minimum of 12 overs left in the last hour when we restart after the change of innings break. The last law that I'm covering is the follow-on. There's only 2 slides here, but I do have a few examples as well, just to show you exactly how the follow-on law works. So when it comes to a 2 innings match of 5 days or more, and let's use Test match cricket as an example, because 99.99% of Test match cricket spans over 5 days. So 5 days or more, the side which bats first and lead by at least 200 runs. So the lead needs to be after both sides has batted. If the lead of the side batting first is at least 200 runs in a 5-day test match, the captain of the side that batted first has the option of asking the other side to follow on. The option is on the table. The captain does not have to exercise the option. It is up to the captain to decide, yes, I want the other side to go follow on, or no, I don't want them to go follow on. I'm happy to go bat again, to go bat now in my second innings. Not all more-day cricket are played over 5 days. I mentioned earlier that in South Africa, provincial cricket gets played over 4 days. So now when it comes to in a 2 innings match, and it is a 3 or 4 day game, now the minimum lead needs to be 150 runs. If it's a 2-day match and both sides can bat twice, the minimum lead needs to be 100 runs. And if you play 4 innings in 1 day, now the minimum lead needs to be 75 runs. Let's look at 2 examples just to illustrate how this works. So in our 5-day test match between South Africa and Zim, South Africa scored 569 in their first innings. Zim was then dismissed for 367. So the captain wants Zim to follow on. So what is your response going to be? Yes, captain of South Africa, Zim can follow on, or no, they're not allowed, they can't follow on, you need to go back again. So let's apply the law. The law tells us in a 5-day test match, the minimum lead needs to be 200 runs. So what is the lead of South Africa? So the lead of South Africa is 202 runs. How did I get 202? I took 569, which was what South Africa scored in their first innings, and I subtracted 367, which is what Zimbabwe scored in their first innings. And that's how I got 202 runs. So South Africa lead on the first inning by 202. Can South Africa enforce the follow on? Yes, they can. Why? Because the lead needs to be at least 200 runs. Here the lead is 202. No issue. South Africa captain can enforce the follow on. It's his or her prerogative. They don't have to enforce the follow on, but the option is on the table. Second example. Now I'm using a provincial 4-day match. Here the Warriors scored 437 in their first innings, and they dismissed the Cobras for 287 in their first innings. The captain of the Warriors wants the Cobras to follow on. What is your response? So in a 4-day game, what should the minimum lead be? 150. So what is the lead of the Warriors? The lead of the Warriors is exactly 150, because if you take 437 and subtract 287 from it, you get 150. So the law wants the lead to be at least 150, and here the lead is 150. So the captain of the Warriors do have the option of asking the Cobras to follow on. On this slide, I want to focus on what happens if the first day of play is lost. If no play takes place on the first day of our test match or of our provincial 4-day competition. But emphasis here is on the first day's play needs to be lost. And if the first day's play is lost, so no play took place on the first day. Bowlers and umpire did not call play on day number 1. And if that is the case, now you lost day 1. So now let's say play can start on time on day 2. So now you have 4 days remaining in our test match. So now in terms of what the minimum lead should be in our game, it will now be 150 runs, because there are 4 days left in our test match, and the law tells us if it's the minimum lead for a 4-day game should be 150 runs. But you can only activate this clause if the first day's play is lost. If you start on time in a, let's say, test match South Africa Zimbabwe, and we start on time on day 1, play starts, we have a completed day's play on day 1. Day 2 is completely washed out. Day 3 is also completely washed out. Day 4 is also completely washed out. So now you lost 3 days due to rain, and play can only start on day 5. So now the captains ask you, oh, Abdullah, we started on day 1, but we lost three days. So in terms of the follow-on, what is it going to be, seeing that we're now on day number 5? So now my response to the captain will be, because we started play on day 1, the minimum lead will remain 200 runs in terms of the follow-on. So we must lose the first day's play. Let's look at an example. Test match South Africa Zim. Toss took place at 9:30 on day 1. Play is about to start at 10 o'clock. The bowlers in umpire calls play. The opening bowler runs into bowl, takes about 3 steps, and the heavens open. It's bucketing down. Umpire stops the bowler. Bowler did not deliver the ball. It now rains throughout day 1 and the whole of day 2. Play will start at 9:30 on day 3. And South Africa is dismissed after the tea break on day 3 for 3:23. So then the captain come to you, the umpires, and ask, how much do they need to restrict Zimbabwe to enforce the follow-on? So what is your response going to be? So the minimum lead in our 5-day test match is 200 runs. But with play being called and the opening bowler starting his or her run up, that means day 1 has started. So we had play on day 1, even though a ball wasn't bowled, but play was called and that opening bowler took 2 or 3 steps. So now we need to take, day 1 will count. So now, yes, we didn't have any play on day 2, but because day 1 counted, the minimum lead in this test match will stay 200 runs. Tom, thank you. That's all I'm covering. I'm done with Law 14. Handing now back to you.
Thank you very much, Abdullah, and thank you to all the candidates for engaging their brain for a calculation session second to none. Just a heads up that in lecture number 6, we will be having revision questions for you to attempt to answer these calculation questions. We know that the best way to learn these calculations is by practice, and the best way for you to practice is with us, so that when you attempt to answer a question, we can let you know if you've answered it correctly or if we need to help you along the way. So don't be overwhelmed by the content from tonight. It does take some time for people to get used to these new concepts if they are new to you, and it does take practice for you to perfect the calculations. So now let's move on to the questions posed in the chat box while we were presenting. The first question is from Atik Rahman. For the last hour of play, if another 6 overs is to be bowled to complete the 20 overs that need to be bowled as per law in the last hour, as per the scenario in the match, his match is coming towards a draw. So in this case, Abdullah, if both captains agree to end the match and shake hands at the 14th over, if there's still 6 overs remaining to bowl the 20 overs in the last hour, can the captains inform the umpires that they want to shake hands and end the match early? Or do we have to play that minimum of 20 overs in the last hour till the end?
Okay, so Prof, I'm going to give you 2 answers. Answer according to the laws of cricket, and I'm also going to give you an answer according to playing conditions. So according to the laws, Prof, yeah, they have to play, they have to bowl the 20 overs. There's nothing in the law that covers captains can come together and agree, to end the game. But there is a playing condition that covers this, that actually says that as soon as you've reached the last hour and there's no a result cannot be reached, the playing condition allows the captains, if they together agree, the playing condition allows them to shake hands in the last hour, and then we don't need them to complete the other 14 overs. So yes, Prof, playing condition is covered. It covers that. Players, captains can shake hands. Law, yeah, unfortunately, there's nothing in the law that says once we reach the last hour, captains can shake hands, so they need to bowl that 20 overs. Over, Tom.
Thanks, Tula. Ansh Shimpi from Tanzania asks, are we allowed to use calculators during the level 3 exam? Yes, Ansh, you are definitely allowed to use calculators. You are encouraged to use calculators because quite often if you try and do the maths in your head, you will make a silly mistake and all your process work will be let down by a small calculation error. So yes, whether you're writing the exam in person at your home association in South Africa, or you're writing the exam online with WPCUA and Exam Online, you are allowed to use a calculator. You may not, however, use your phone as a calculator. So please make sure you have a normal calculator. It doesn't have to be a scientific calculator. A normal calculator will easily work to use in the exam for the calculations. Next question is from Zainulabdin Patel. Apologies,
Yeah,
Mr.
let's
Patel.
call him Zainu. Let's call him Zainu, Tom.
Yes, okay, Zainu. When a bowler starts his over, he comes to the umpire and he says he's bowling right arm over. But when he starts his second over, he does not inform the umpire that he is going to bowl around the wicket, and he does bowl around the wicket. He has changed his mode of delivery. Is this a no ball, Abdullah, or should the umpire ask the bowler at the beginning of every over what mode of delivery that bowler is going to deliver?
So Zainu, technically, as per the law, yes, you need to call and signal a no ball. But the law also once actually tells the umpire, you need to ascertain whether the bowler is bowling right arm or left arm or over or around the wicket. So if you want to apply the law, to the T, yes, every over you need to ask. And practically, or what I do practically is, if a bowler tells me he's bowling, let's say, right arm over the wicket, once the bowler comes for the second over, and especially if there's a right and a left hander, I will just, before as the bowler hands usually a cap to me, I'll just confirm, bowler, you staying over? Yes, ump is staying over. I'll relay that message to the bowler. So yeah, I will try to keep the striker informed, especially with the right hand, left hand. Every over, I'll just confirm you staying over. If you are going to go around, please let me know. Just being proactive, help with the bowler, to make sure that this doesn't happen where suddenly the bowler goes around. But to answer your question, if a bowler goes suddenly change mode, according to the law, you need to call and signal no ball. Over, Tom.
Thanks, Tula. Question from Ahmed. You did answer it in your examples, but I think maybe for the benefit of anyone who might have missed it, let's go through this one as well. In regards to the follow-on law, in a 5-day test match, the follow-on lead needs to be 200 runs or more. Does this mean that they can enforce the follow-on if they have a 200-run lead, or must the lead be 201 runs and more? Please take us through that again, Abdullah.
So, Ahmed, the wording that the rookie error, Tom, thank you. The wording that the lawmakers use is the lead needs to be at least 200 runs if it's a 5-day test match. If it's a 3 or 4 day, at least 150. Let's use test match as an example. So if the lead is 200 or more, at least 200, the captain has the option to ask the other side to follow on. So in a test match, the lead needs to be less than 200, 199 or less, then the option of following on is not on the table. But if the lead is 200, 201, 205, 220, 500, if that is the lead, at least 200, yes, the option is on the table to ask the other side to follow on. Over, Tom.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Abdullah. And after all of that heavy calculation presentations, I see no more questions in the chat box. I see no more hands in the meeting room. Abdullah, I think those numbers are still going around and around in everyone's heads. And it'll be exciting to see them putting their knowledge into action in lecture number 6 when we have calculation questions for them to answer. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for their attendance and their interaction. This lecture has been recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel latest tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. South African time. Our next lecture is on Thursday, same time, same place, same Microsoft Teams meeting link. Have a good week until then. Thank you so much and good night.